Good morning. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Department of Medical Education, I welcome you all to this national webinar on Medical Education Series 1. Today we have with us our director, Dr. Rakesh Agarwal, who is the director of JIPMA, who will be delivering a webinar, national webinar on the topic Online Medical Education, an Opportunity or a Distraction. So I think this is the right time we need to learn more about online medical education, because all of a sudden in the wake of COVID-19, most of the medical institutions have changed to online mode. So in the light of this, I invite Dr. Rakesh Agarwal to deliver the presentation. Welcome, sir.
Good morning. May I take your permission to take off my mask, because that would make it easier, and I will put it on once the talk is over. So, good morning. Let me share my slides with you. Let me begin with an apology. I am sorry that technology problems prevented us from having this talk 3 days ago. The topic that I have been asked to speak on is online teaching in medical education. Is this an opportunity or is it a distraction? I realize that today we are looking at online teaching in a very different way in view of the coronavirus pandemic. However, I am going to speak as if this coronavirus pandemic and a special situation that needed online mode of teaching did not exist. And let us look at the idea of online teaching in the world as it existed till about 4 months ago. First, let us look at what is medical education. Medical education is training, teaching, education as related to making a medical practitioner and the work related to that of a medical practitioner. This can be of several types. We can have the entry level education in medicine, basically the MBBS training. It of course includes training for nurses, for allied health sciences. It includes postgraduate training, including that in subspecialties, what we know as DM, MCH level training. It includes specialized training, which is for very niche subjects. For instance, we might want to train people in a particular surgical procedure in a very small area. We could want to train them about a certain disease, a certain kind of specialized therapeutic procedure, for instance. It could include training in fields related to medicine, such as biostatistics, medical ethics, research ethics, administration of a hospital, etc., and continuing medical education, which is not necessarily focused on a topic, but is a wider training in a subject for those who are already practicing that subject. Another way to look at medical education is the domain of knowledge. This could be cognitive, what we also know as theoretical knowledge. It could be psychomotor skills, or it could be affective or emotional components of medical practice. In the classical model, education was imparted in a classroom, a room, a setting, a location where both the teacher or the trainer and the student or the taught were present. They were together in time and place. A lot of teaching was done by the teacher, who gave a lecture, who gave a demonstration. However, there was surely a way for a two-way exchange, a feedback from the students. The students could ask questions, the students' faces would tell the teacher whether they were understanding, and the teacher could in turn give feedback to the students. The change to online learning did not come as a sudden thing. We have for many years, for more than a century, have had something called distance learning. What this did was that it separated the two parts, the teacher and the taught, in space and at times even in time. So, they were separated in space and or in time. However, there was an attempt at maintaining a two-way exchange. It cannot be just a one-way delivery. So, if just the teacher sends something to the student, that cannot be called distance learning. There really has to be a two-way method for some feedback to go from the student to the teacher, and then a response to that from the teacher to the student. This exchange is extremely important. What were the beginnings of distance learning? It began nearly 200 years ago. Sir Isaac Pitman, who taught shorthand, decided to do this not in a classroom but using postal system, because at that time in the UK they introduced uniform postage, which was not decided by how much was the distance that the letter travelled. Before that, a letter was charged depending on the distance between the person who was sending the letter and the person who was receiving. To teach shorthand, he started transcribing English text into shorthand, put that on a postcard and send it to his students who were at a distance, and the students were supposed to transcribe it back into English and return it to him for correction, and he would correct that and send it back to them. So that is where it began. It expanded and soon it was used for teaching small courses, but later some colleges, some persons, some institutions made this so big that they started to offer equivalent of a degree course for in a particular subject, were using distance learning based on material that was sent by postage. This led to a conflict. These exams, this examination was conducted by small institutions, and the question was, do they have the right to award a degree? This led the Queen of England to issue a charter to University of London in the name of University of London External Programme, and they were permitted to offer degree programs which were very well controlled, and they could offer degrees by an external or distance learning mode. This continues even today. University of London International Programme is its current name, and it offers degrees in several different subjects, and one of the somewhere that I have a degree under that program is from London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. That institution provides training, and the examination is conducted by the University of London, and that provides the degrees. In the late 20th century and early part of the current century, computers and related technologies were introduced. This also made it possible for multimedia to be used. Initially, this was done using CDs. The universities or colleges will record everything on a CD and send it to their students. Interactions started through the use of email, and today a lot of this course material is made available through the internet. Over the last 30 to 40 years, there has been a paradigm shift. We have these phrases such as e-learning, online teaching, large learning management systems which allow people to enroll, where attendance is kept, where there can be evaluation, material is delivered, and we have also something called virtual learning environments, and I am not going to go into that today because I am sure you will have more sessions on advanced features of online learning in this course or otherwise as we go along. E-learning can be looked at in several ways. One method to look at it is whether it is synchronous or asynchronous. Synchronous e-learning is when the person who is presenting, the person who is speaking, the person who is teaching is interacting with those who are the listeners, the recipients of the information, the students at the same time. So, there is a separation in space but not in time. This includes online real-time live teacher delivery of information such as you and I are having just now. There can be face-to-face discussions, there can be video conversations, there can be virtual classrooms, and all this is synchronous e-learning, where the two sides, the person delivering and the person receiving the information, are interacting at the same time. A variation is asynchronous e-learning, where participants can exchange ideas and information without being engaged or involved simultaneously. So, this can be done through email, this can be done through blogs. At one time it was done through CD-ROMs which were recorded, video material was recorded or training material was recorded and mailed to people. It can also be lectures which are recorded and delivered through the internet. There can be textbooks which are web supported. So, all this is asynchronous. The advantage of asynchronous is these can be self paced, there can be a more flexible time frame. So, if I was speaking, you did not have to be logged in at this time and skip your other time, and but still there should be an ability for the student to reach out for help when needed. There can also be a mixed pattern. So, we could have this delivery. Right now we are in the synchronous mode, the lecture will be recorded and it might be made available offline, and in which case it is a synchronous asynchronous delivery. However, I am not sure that in that asynchronous mode we would have ability for people to ask questions to me and then have those answered, though that can surely be built in if we decide to. Another way to look at e-learning is that it can be linear or it can be collaborative. A linear e-learning is when the content is presented linearly one after the other, much like we have a book. So, in a book you would have the first chapter which would be an introduction to the subject, the second chapter could be on symptomatology, third chapter could be on pathogenesis or pathophysiology. Same way we could present the content linearly in a e-learning course or online course. This is useful to teach static processes, to teach material in the conventional manner. Of course, each of these can be combined with multimedia formats. So, when we talk about symptomatology, there could be a patient interview, there could be pictures of patients, there could be pictures of x-rays, there could be a video of an endoscopy for instance. So, all that can be combined, but still the delivery is in a predetermined linear manner for each person. All the participants get to see this in the same sequence. The second method of delivery can be collaborative learning. This is something where we encourage or require students to work together. So, people are brought in, they are given a case scenario and they are supposed to interact on it. So, learning takes place through conversations, through interaction, through problem solving, and this is believed to give a better method of learning. People learn much more, plus they learn how to work on a problem together, and this is believed to be a better mode of learning, though one cannot say that linear learning does not have a role, even that has a role. The technologies we can use, we of course can use computer and internet, audio and video like we are using, but one can use whiteboards, meaning the person who is speaking has an ability to write on a board and that can be seen by the audience. In a collaborative teaching, it is also possible that the 5 students who are working together could work on a document together or on a presentation together or on a worksheet together. So, Google Docs or some related softwares can allow that. There can be a virtual classroom, there can be augmented reality, there could be artificial intelligence systems. All this is possible and this is changing day by day, and we have newer technologies coming in. Finally, a special form of online teaching that I must mention is something called MOOCs, also known as Massive Open Online Courses. These are courses that are aimed at unlimited participation and open access. Open as in free. So, there are universities, there are institutions, there are individuals who are recording courses, several of them at extremely high level of sophistication, and these are made available to virtually everybody around the world and the access is open. Some components at times could be charged and other components could be free. Many people offer the training free, but if you want to have an evaluation and you want a diploma or a certificate at the end, then that is charged. These can include traditional course material. So, these could be lectures which have been filmed, recorded and are made available online. This could be readings of documents, these could be problem sets, problem solving. There could be interactive courses where the teachers even give away their time, so that when they hold a course, people can ask them questions and they would respond. People can submit their assignments and those could be evaluated either by the trainer or they would pair up 2 students. So, all this software has to be made available, that costs money, but they make that available free, that the 2 students are paired together and notebook of A is checked by B and that replies of B are checked by A and so on, and these kind of things are done. There are quizzes which, using the online mode, when you answer the quiz you get a response whether the answer is correct or wrong. If it is correct, then you get some more information. If it is wrong, you get some explanation why your answer is incorrect, etc. So, all these are possible, and many of these are attended by several thousand people at one time. So, knowing what online education means, what has been the effect of distance learning, what is its role today, is what I am supposed to talk about. When I try to think about it, to me it appears that this role of distance learning is akin to what refrigeration did to food and eating. Ever since human beings came on earth, they had food, they hunted animals, they got plant products and they ate them. Then they started agriculture, they settled down, they started growing plants and getting food from there. However, what they needed to do was grow, cook and eat. They grew things, whatever grew at a place, they cooked it and they ate it. There was no possibility of long distance transport of food. However, when refrigeration came in, what it allowed us to grow and cook food at one place, refrigerate it and transport it to a distance, and then it could be eaten. At times it was grown, it was refrigerated, and then it is cooked and eaten at a second location. Exactly, look at growing food as, or cooking food as the teacher, eating food as the trainer, and refrigeration and transport is similar to the online mode of delivery. So, today a lot of countries, you have very little availability of natural food, virtually a lot of food is frozen, and the same is happening in our country too. You go into a mall, this is what you see. How has it changed things? Sometimes we do not think deeply about it. If we try to think, we find that the lifestyle changed a lot after refrigeration of food became available. Before refrigeration, human beings could live only in areas where food plants could grow or animals could be reared. So, most of human beings lived near rivers, on the river banks, they lived in valleys and in harbors where there was land available which was fertile, from where they could grow food or fish could be got from the sea. So, that is how human beings lived. They did not live away from these areas. The moment refrigeration became available, now food could be carried to these areas. So, if you look at places like Arizona, Las Vegas and several places in the interior of Saharan desert, they could not be, they were not places that were fit for human habitation, but once food could be frozen and carried to those areas, those places became habitable. Our food production practices changed. Earlier we could, so in the coastal areas we ate rice, if you went to the northern part of the country we ate wheat, in the north nobody knew about dosa or idli because there was very little wheat growing and so on. But once refrigeration and transport started, even crops were not transported, but once refrigeration led to transport in many parts of the world, things started to be farmed, things that could grow at a particular place would now be grown and in a frozen state taken to other places where they were not usually available. So, that led to a lot of industry, a lot of commercial farming. So, at different places you could have fruits and vegetables which were otherwise not available there because they did not grow there. You could have things, you could have cauliflower, frozen cauliflower during summer, you could have things which were not in season. So, you could freeze cut mangoes and then you could have them available when mangoes were not in season. Also, something that we do not realize, it meant that people could now shop less frequently. They did not have to go for fresh food very often. So, in the US people would go shop once in a month, get frozen things, put them in the freezer and they had more leisure time. A lot of emancipation of women had a lot to do with being able to cook food at one time and put it in the refrigerator so that they did not have to cook 3 times a day and spend all the time in the kitchen. So that led to a big social change. Distance learning did the same. Two major changes: access. Today, so it made higher education available to less affluent students who could not afford to go to a university, who could not afford to travel away from home, and they could learn being at a distance from the university. Years ago, Charles Dickens called distance education as the people's university. Also, it led to a change in pedagogy. This can be summarized by Dr. J.J. Clark, what he said more than 100 years ago, writing in Science about distance education. He said, the regular technical school aims to educate a man broadly. So, if it wants to make it an engineer, it teaches him all the engineering skills. Our aim, on the contrary, is to educate him only along some particular line. So, you could also learn some specialized niche area rather than having to do the whole degree. Also, he wrote, the college demands that a student should have a certain educational qualification to enter. So, if you wanted to learn a particular kind of surgery or a particular kind of thing, then you had to have certain essential pre-qualification. So, intake was based on that, and that the students study for approximately the same length of time. So, everybody studies for 3 years for a graduation, and when they have finished their courses, they should be qualified to enter any one of a number of branches of a particular profession. So, you learnt everything about a profession. Distance learning, on the contrary, is aiming to make our courses fit the particular needs of the students who take them. So, you do not need to go to the market and buy a full suit including a coat, a pant and a tie. You could go and buy only the pant. So, that is, you could look at what your needs and you could look at this. So, that is what changed with distance education. So, today distance education, and for that matter online learning, allows access to knowledge even in geographical areas where there is no university, no teachers in a particular subject. So, you can be in sub-Saharan Africa and you can learn about artificial intelligence, you can learn about spacecrafts, you can learn about whatever have you. You are interested in learning how a particular robotic surgery is done, you can do that sitting in an area where there is no university or somebody experienced in the area. Secondly, it allows you greater flexibility. It allows a person to study while pursuing a job. Earlier, that was very difficult. When I was a student, if I wanted to do something else, it was extremely difficult. But today, you can be doing a medical degree, a postgraduate degree, and you could, on the weekends, at any time of the day that you are free, you could learn additional things. You could learn about finance, you can learn about management through online learning. Thirdly, online learning is time saving. So, if I had to learn something sitting here in Pondicherry in JIPMER, if I wanted to attend some classes on management, even if there are evening classes, I would need to commute to Pondicherry University, which is about 40 minutes away. 40 minutes going, 40 minutes coming back. They could have 3 lectures, and in between there could be time which I am not interested in that lecture. So, all that time is saved through online learning. It could also be cheaper. However, that depends. If you are attending a very niche course which has to be designed for only 20 people around the world, then it is going to be costlier. But of course, if you do not have to commute, if you do not have to stay in a hostel, not spend on other things related to hostel stay, it could for that reason be cheaper. These courses can be scalable. You can teach many more people. So, we needed to train people in how to use PPE. Suddenly, we could make online courses and teach people quickly. If there are only a few good quality trainers, you can still train a lot of people, and that is what is being done in public health emergencies. So, we have been able to train people about managing Ebola, managing COVID very quickly. In areas where the information changes very rapidly, online teaching has the advantage that what you are teaching can change. In the traditional classroom and textbook teaching, you cannot do that. So, we came in hydroxychloroquine, then it went off, came in remdesivir, and now we are talking about corticosteroids being useful. We can change the knowledge that we are imparting very quickly. it is more learner centered. So, if you want to give the same knowledge, but to people who are advanced learners, people who are at the intermediate level, people who are at the lower level, you can take the same content and adapt it to the needs and level of knowledge of the learners. It uses multimedia, allows you to use multimedia, delivering the same thing through the visual route as a video, as audio, and as question answers can improve learning and retention of knowledge. Also, if you need to teach people psychomotor skills, videos are excellent. If I explain to a person how to don a PPE versus if I can make a video, video is going to be much more effective. There are certain other advantages. It is repeatable. I can listen to it now, I can listen to it again, I can listen to it again after a week, after a month, after a year. Some of the useful videos, for instance the NEJM videos on doing certain procedures, I have them on my computer and I am free to repeat them when I want. It is easier to ensure consistency. When I teach, I could teach different things on different days using the same slide sets, but if it is recorded, once you ensure that your presentation is good, then it can be used multiple times to ensure consistency. Today with learning management systems, you can monitor who's learned something or not. So, for instance, a lot of our COVID training to people who are going to our COVID ward, we are doing online. It is possible for us to see whether people downloaded those videos. We haven't enforced whether they have run it, but surely we could enforce that also, and today's technology allows us to see whether people have listened to a particular video or not. We have added a few questions at the end to see whether they have learnt or not. So, all that is possible. Does it work? This one? Somebody wants to know something about the slide? We can do that during the question answer session, and the slides will be with you. They are repeatable, so you can always see them later. Okay. So, does it work? Here is a study published last year looking at whether online learning works better than offline in an undergraduate medical education, and it is a systematic review. These authors reviewed the literature and they found 16 articles. Of them, in 15 there was information comparing offline teaching on the left and online teaching on the right. They looked at the score that students had after the course was over, and we can see nearly all studies showed online learning, the test scores after online teaching to be either better or similar to those after offline teaching, and these were randomized studies. The number of subjects in most of the studies was small, but we can still see that this is good. Unfortunately, one of the studies here had a very high difference, and the question was whether this was making the pooled result look better. But even if we exclude that one study, we can see that online learning in this meta-analysis did better than offline teaching. When they looked at the change in score from pre-test to post-test, there were only 3 studies including that outlier, and they have again found that though statistically not significant, there was a gain in the change in the post-test score appeared to be more in online teaching compared to offline. Retention of knowledge tested by another test at 21 days done only in one study again showed online training to be better. When I was at another institution at SGPGI Lucknow, in collaboration with Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, we did this study of online versus on-site training in teaching health research methodology. It was a randomized trial where we took 60 people who were MD trained, who were either senior residents or faculty members, randomized them into 2 arms. There was 1 dropout in each. One group received a 3-day training course in research ethics, a 3-day biostatistics course in the classroom and ethics training online. The other group received biostatistics course online and research ethics in the classroom for 3 days, and we evaluated their knowledge before and after and their acceptance of the course. Pre-training, the 2 arms, subjects in the 2 arms were similar, nearly 75% men, nearly 50% of them faculty, and their knowledge in biostatistics and ethics before the course was similar. After the course, immediately after, we found that in the on-site course, the scores were better compared to online. However, when we looked at 3 months later, we found the two training courses had similar scores. Those in online format seemed to improve over time, whereas those in the on-site format did very well immediately, but their scores declined as we went along with time. And similarly, in the ethics also, we found that there was a difference with on-site being better immediately after the course, but in the long run the scores became equal in the two arms. I will skip this slide. However, everything is not hunky dory with online learning. There are challenges, there are problems. First of all, most people say that there can be a lack of familiarity with technology and that may make learning difficult. However, to me that is more in the mind, that is more our mental makeup, and we think that we cannot learn technology. And this is illustrated by this experiment that was done in India nearly 18 years ago. Dr. Sugata Mitra, who worked with NIIT in New Delhi, who was into online education, made a change in the wall of the office. This wall was located, and on this side of the office was located a slum. They reconstructed the wall, making these kiosks where they placed computers. So there was a screen, there was a keyboard, and there was a mouse. They put these ledges here so that a tall person, an adult, could not access, and only children could access these computers. And when they did this, the screen was visible from the street, the PC was available to anyone who passed by, it had online access, it had several programs, but no instructions on how to use this. And remember, this was 2001, 2002, when computers were not commonplace, and they left it unattended. Children came from the nearest slum, they inquisitively looked at these, they started moving the mice, they started exploring, and soon they found that when the mouse reached a particular place and you clicked, something happened, and they explored further, and they found that very soon the children had learnt how to surf the web. They had learnt how to open program, they had learnt how to close program, they had found how to search for information, they found how they could download games, download videos, download music all by themselves without knowing anything. So if they could do it, so can we. And actually, with the COVID, when a lot of things have changed, all of us have learnt how to use technology. Yes, there are issues, there can be slow internet, there can be unreliable internet, but even that is changing. So the most main problem is actually cultural resistance, not technology. The technology is so good today that we can learn it by ourselves. The other problem is that we as a society have not learned to accept distance learning as good as equivalent to a degree. That's partly because we have not laid down a regulatory framework. There is a lack of standards. So you could attend one online class and it doesn't work well. There could be another course and that is very good. We have no ways to assess which courses are good, which courses reach a certain, we have no method of certifying courses and saying which are equivalent to a degree, what all courses must be taken for a person to be qualified for a degree. Once we lay that down, and that is happening, that will happen, then this would be acceptable. Secondly, in some parts of the world, in countries such as ours, there is an unwillingness to pay for online learning. People are willing to go to a university and pay the fees. Even there we have questions. Every time a government university increases fees, we see a clamor, people want the fees to be reduced. But people have to realize that technology costs, making these courses costs, and we would have to be willing to pay. Already after COVID things are changing, and the only thing is change has been hastened and it will happen. Learners have some barriers. Once you are trying to learn online, you need a lot of motivation. One finds that a lot of people start these courses but do not complete, they stop somewhere midway. It is very difficult for people who have a low motivation to complete these courses. Those who are known to procrastinate, those who cannot meet deadlines find it particularly difficult, and there are always distractions. So, one has to become familiar, one has to learn that they have to complete courses. Again, possibly will happen with time. People find these courses to be very isolating, they miss social interaction, and we will come to that later. the instructor has to be available to clear doubts. So, if you are offering these courses, we will come to that as instructors, you need to be able to interact with people. In our country, there is a particular problem. Our working hours sometimes are long, we spend a long time commuting, so people have limited time. Small houses with limited privacy, with lack of noise, makes it very difficult for us to attend these courses. As far as trainers or teachers is concerned, again there is a cultural resistance. People do not find teaching online courses as fashionable, as enriching as they like teaching a classroom. We like classrooms where everybody says yes sir, yes madam, rather than sitting in front of a screen and teaching. There is a lack of infrastructure. You need good infrastructure. We at JIPMER are fortunate to have this studio where I am sitting and teaching you. Even then sometimes the infrastructure fails, as happened last week, but still I think this has to evolve. Teaching online needs us to repurpose our skills, need to relearn some skills, and that needs to happen, and we need to teach our trainers in these. It is thought that people will continue to teach in the classroom and again find time to record good quality videos, good quality online courses. We have to realize, the institutions have to realize that this means extra work. We would need to give people dedicated time for good online courses. And then people do not look at online courses as well. So, if people will not respect online teachers, then the society will not respect them, then it is wrong for us to expect the teachers to be able to do this. And finally, the teachers will need to realize that just like they engage with students in a classroom, in a physical classroom, they have to be willing to answer questions of students online, some of which might arrive later. A good online instructor has to be passionate about the subject. They have to be approachable synchronously or in asynchronous mode when the questions arrive, say by email or by another mode. You need certain skills to be able to encourage people to engage even when they are at a distance, and all this needs training, and we need to train our teachers, and the teachers need to agree to such training. One problem continues to be evaluation. Evaluation methods on online courses have often been limited to recall knowledge and superficial skills. They do not seem to learn test deep learning, they do not seem to test motor skills, they do not seem to test the emotional component. And in our country there is a particular problem that whenever we do this, people try to cheat, they try to plagiarize, they try to look up questions online, the answers online, and that poses a problem, and we need to find ways to deal with this. So, we need to create questions that require higher order thinking. We need to ask them to explain, analyze, ask questions on pathophysiology rather than on anatomy. So, all this will need a lot of hard work, and once we do this, it should be possible for us to take evaluation also to a higher degree. We cannot ask only objective questions, we will need to have open ended questions where people need to provide an answer, even it could be fill in the blanks. That is better than an objective multiple choice question. To ensure integrity, we will need to remind students of their academic integrity policies. Some people have found that if you ask them to sign a contract of academic integrity so that punishment can be done if they are not following those, then that helps. One will need to restrict the testing window, that everybody is tested at the same time rather than people being able to take tests at different times. Give them a short period of time, set up only one question at a time, so that you see question 1, you need to answer it immediately. You can't go to question 2 and then come back to question 1. So, backtracking is not permitted. Vary the sequence in which questions are asked so that 3 people cannot sit at the computer at the same time and help each other. The options will vary, and then if you do not give answers, it should not be that A and B are able to sit together. A answers the question, gets the answer, and he is not bothered about score, and B, he can tell the answer to B and then B can answer correctly. In the end, let me go back to my example of refrigerated food. So, we said refrigerated food is as good. Is it really as good? There are problems. We all believe, rightly or wrongly, that refrigerated food is not as good. It has a lower nutritional value. It of course doesn't taste as well as the fresh food. There is at the very least a perception that it is unhealthy. Sometimes it's even costlier. And today we are realizing that there are issues related to climate change and sustainability. We are causing so much of global warming through this refrigeration and transporting food from one place to another. What is ideal? Ideal thing is a combination of the two. Use fresh food when you can, but don't be afraid to use refrigerated food when you need to. The same applies to education. The ideal thing is a combination of fresh food, the classroom teaching, and refrigerated food, the online teaching, the online education. So, we have today a concept of blended learning. I am sure you will have more webinars on that mode of teaching, which combines the best of both the worlds, the fresh food, the refrigerated food, the classical chalk and board teaching room, and the interactive digital content. That provides an ideal mix of face-to-face interaction, the green, the nice look of fresh food. It provides personalized system of instruction. We can cook to our taste, but it provides the flexibility. But that is, it can also provide you things which are not available at a particular place, what comes from the refrigerated food. It improves retention, it improves reinforcement, and therefore is more effective. So, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, let me say, there is no one best thing. There is the classroom teaching, there is the online teaching. They are two different methods, they are two different tools of delivering knowledge and skills. They are complementary, they are not necessarily competitive. I could have fresh potatoes and I could have frozen peas and I could cook them together. I need to do that. So, the ideal thing is to have an optimal mix of the two. That in the case of education will depend on level of education and training that I need to impart, the field of education that I am trying to impart. It also depends on the readiness of the trainers and the audience to use either mode. Is the people I am cooking for willing to eat refrigerated food? Are they wanting food that doesn't grow in this area? If they don't want that, if they are not ready for it, then I can't do it. But if they are, that's possibly the best dish to make. And then what are the resources available to me? What technology, whether I have the right technology, whether I have the right skills, whether I have adequate money and time, not only as a trainer but also as people who are trying to learn. Do they have computers? Do they have internet access? Do they have time? Are they wanting to learn during daytime? Are they wanting to learn in the evening? And depending on that, I can do a mix of the two. We need to, however, understand one thing is clear: online education is here to stay. Its role is going to increase. So, it is best that we decide that it is here and we adapt to it rather than resist. As a mom, if I think that I can go on with my rice and chapati and not give children noodles, which is the packaged food, I am mistaken. Noodles are here to stay. I have to have a mixture of the both. I have to accept noodles rather than resist them. Thank you.
Some questions in the chat.
Are there any questions in the chat box? Let me try to see. So, here is the chat box. Please place your questions. Let me review it quickly if there are already any questions.
Good morning.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, what about the rural areas where the internet facilities are still not very good? So, children coming from those areas right now where they are locked in, how will they manage?
I agree with you, that is a problem. But I think even in many rural areas, there are times of the day when internet is available. The other method is it's actually possible for us to download that content in an urban area, put it on a CD and send it to them, put it on a pen drive. Actually, nobody uses CD today. What stops us from doing that? It is just a question of our deciding what we can do and what we cannot do. The material today is so amenable to, transport in different ways. so we can actually really do it. It just, and once you put it on a pen drive, you can copy to multiple pen drives so easily, and people have those skills. In the villages, they are listening to online music. All of them, they are watching movies. They will go to an urban area, download the movie, download the songs. So in small towns, we have these centers, what were at one time public hall offices. They run a place where you can go and carry your, they will put it on your phone, all the music, right? People who do not even have internet access will do that. All that is possible today. Okay. What efforts are being done by at policy level by MCI to bring in online medical education? So I think it becomes very. I don't think MCI in any way prohibits online medical education. Rather, they have been trying to say that there should be videos, there should be okay, whether you do it online or offline. Remember, MCI will still have to say that there will have to be classroom lectures, because the problem is that whether people are attending in online teaching or not, and for a primary course that becomes very difficult. But this can be in addition, things that you can teach better on online mode. Or again, let's not look at online as online, where you can use computer based programs. They are perfectly all okay with it. So I would surely encourage my students to learn anatomy. As a gastroenterologist, all of us are, for years we have given people videos of endoscopy to look at how to do procedures, and people are already doing it. So I don't think MCI in any way prohibits this. Can anyone use MOOC platform to design starter course? To some extent, yes. There are MOOC platforms, that would allow, but MOOC platforms can't let you be there if your course is not good. But if you are good enough, and if you have some course that is ready, you talk to, there are agencies. So in India we have SWAYAM, it's a platform held by IIT Madras, and there are many other organizations. So UGC has these places. You've seen possibly TV programs that UGC makes and transmits. So they also have online. You send them your course, they would be willing to have a look at it and host it online for you. Visual subject like anatomy, yes, there are many programs. At one time, digital anatomy or virtual human, these were projects that NIH made. Many of them today are paid, but it is entirely possible. So what they did was, they did a CT of a male and a female cadaver, and they put it all online. They gave colors to every structure, and all those things are possible in anatomy and are actually available. How can we connect the students for live online class at a time when they are more than 100 in number? So right now I am on Zoom platform, and we had, when I saw 298 people logged in, this allows up to 300 people. Platforms are changing. So Microsoft team that we tried to use last time is actually trying to bring in a feature, so that instead of seeing everybody in a separate picture, it would look like a classroom where there are 100 seats, and from each picture they would get each person's picture out and put it as if they are 100 people sitting in a classroom or more than that. So all this is happening, and that is possible. Any feasible methods of online assessment? Yes. So online assessment can vary. For years I have checked papers in epidemiology from the University of London. The papers were given in the classroom, and then they would scan and send that to us. That's minimal online. This year what they did was, they allowed people to download the question paper, write their answers in 24 hours and send. Of course that allows people to cheat if they wish to. We in our institute recently used that using Zoom 40 minutes, and the Viva was conducted over the internet, because our MBBS students had gone away and we had to do some exams for them. It was possible for the teacher to give them, for instance, a dose response curve, show it to them online and ask them to interpret. It was possible for them to show an anatomy drawing and mark something as A and ask them what is A, what is B, what is C. So they could do that. So all that is possible. It just needs a bit of thinking. how to identify dull students and way to uplift them in online education. So it's a very difficult, challenging area. One method is that actually it is good for a so-called slow learner instead of dull, let me use that phrase, because for a slow learner it is possible to now listen to the lecture at a slower pace, to listen to it also again on the weekend and still pick up something. But then I think the student, when you ask them, give them assignments, and if you find in an assignment a student is slow learner, then you would possibly have to do a separate class for them. That could be one method. You could give them feedback, you could talk to them on phone and do this. Request for different online assessment methods, so we can possibly, I'll leave it for my colleague to see if we can have a separate lecture on different online assessment methods. There is a question about LMS, learning management systems. Again, I suppose my lecture was supposed to be a initial lecture. Maybe we can maybe we'll come up with a course on online teaching separately and we'll do that. What will happen to this academic year for undergraduates? Each institution will need to think of itself. We need to think of what to do. It's very difficult right now to say. I could perceive the difference between undergraduate student attending the online session and a postgraduate student attending the same, quoting the same food example. Undergraduate session is like whole meal and a postgraduate session is like a buffet. Further, the degree of interaction is seemingly better in mature. I agree with you. So that's what I said. It depends. If you ask a mom, milk is the thing to go for the young baby. For the older one, calcium could be given through eating ice cream also. Very poor net connection. I'm sorry if we were not audible. Please okay. Okay, let me go back. Do we have any more? How do I go back? Why can't I go? I can possibly scroll from the side. No, scroll. Okay. Conducting online exams for formative assessment is fine. What about summative assessment? Difficult. We are currently considering something like this for our first year students, at least to do that and allow them to move to the third semester so that we can start teaching them the next subjects, but we are not yet sure. We are working on it. Some students just join the online and not attend, just for the attendance statistics. Anything that you can do, sure, you can ask them to answer MCQs at the end. It's also possible for you to in between stop and say, hey, the boy in the blue shirt, what do you think? Or but you also have names here. You could ensure that they talk about their names, that they leave their videos on. You could have an assistant monitor whether they are sitting in front of the computer or not and watching or not. Of course, whether they have their brains open or not, that is very difficult to see. So I have given. Is online teaching relevant to all medical subjects? With a bit of imagination, yes. But yes, we will still need some fresh food. Even for anatomy, some things are actually more suited to online teaching for anatomy rather than offline teaching. The way you can rotate a bone and do an animation on a video is much better than doing this. If some of my colleagues here in anatomy, they have made such beautiful videos that maybe I can ask Dr. Jayaprakashan to make those available online on the same website where this course is being held for you to see, and you would see how that can be done. Some of my anatomy colleagues have done fantastic. They made some fantastic online courses, and those were to show to MCI how anatomy can be taught using online courses. I think it will be useful with their permission if we can show those. Okay. What else? How do you teach practical skills in an online mode? You can show videos. So we have done a lot of training about how to don and doff using PPE, using online method. That was much easier than having to show each person. At the very least, it saved us a PPE. Otherwise, we would use a PPE to teach people how to, don and doff. And this way, but then of course it had to be done. We had to follow it up with a actual person doing it himself. Clinical demonstration of cases should be possible. That's to me possible, especially if we can allow one student to go and work up the case and that person can present. I think it should be possible to do online demonstration of cases. So I believe our dean organized some sessions where a fresh resident, a first year resident worked up a case and they did a clinical discussion and it was transmitted to the undergraduate students, so even that would work. Okay. Let me see if I can answer some more questions. Do I have time? We are past 12 o'clock. Sorry? Okay. Sir, the advantage of offline teaching, the teacher can observe, students are alert. Sometimes if they are indisciplined, they can be corrected at the same time. It will help others to follow. Offline will create active learning and students can see teachers as their role models. Possible. Also, I see it as a advantage. If I was teaching a class of 150 and I was facing towards the board, they could throw a chalk at me or a paper, rolled paper on me. Now they can't do that. That's on the lighter side. Okay, kindly share the PPT through mail. I think you will have a video that would be shared. Can we engage the students for whole 80 hours? How can we do that? That's not possible. So I have been attending a lot of online meetings. I think 2 or 3 hours is about the maximum. Then you have to have a break where people can go have a cup of tea or coffee, have a physiological break, visiting the washroom, etc. So I think that one will need to do. Okay. Please organize a detailed online. So there are a lot of other comments. We'll try and see if we can. I'm not promising anything. Whether we can answer some of these in a written format and make it available on the same website. We'll try that. Thank you. Okay, some participants have raised their hand. Let me try and unmute you one by one. I can see only one. Okay. Hi.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello, good morning, sir.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Sir, yes, sir. The assessment method, you have so many expertise in your JIPMA, sir. Only can come out with a good assessment method for us, sir, so that it will be universally admitted to all the colleges.
You see, it's a bit like if I were to cook sambar, it might be acceptable in one family, not in the other, right? So all these are dishes we need to see. We can try make something, we can make a recipe available and then you can see whether it suits you. We will try. Thank you.
Sure, sir. Thanks a lot.
Come to an end. Thank you for your listening and thank you for joining. Bye bye.
Thank you participants for joining with us. I also thank our director for joining with us and for presenting a informative and more resourceful information on online medical teaching. I hope that all of you would have got the take-home message. It was very clear. He has covered all the major aspects of online medical education, the challenges and the opportunities available for the medical educators. Now the way forward is that you have to see how you are going to embrace technology judiciously and rationally in your day-to-day activities. So I once again thank all the participants and our director Dr. Rakesh Agarwal for joining with us and for delivering this wonderful presentation. We hope, the forthcoming programs are already there in the website. You can register for the forthcoming programs and we will also send you a link for your feedback. Thank you one and all.